When computers were first invented, they were the size of a room. By 1970, they'd shrunk to the size of a car. By 1982, one would sit on a table. Today, though, we've reached the stage where a big, powerful computer sits neatly inside a cell phone. This latest stage is likely to be seen as the most important. For the past 50 years, computing has meant sitting at a desk and thinking about desky things like folders and files and trash cans. A cell phone is a very, very different device. It's there when we travel, it's there when we socialise, it's there when we shop, it's even there in bed. Putting computing power into such a small device is likely to change computing out of all recognition, and our lives with it. 30 years after the personal computer revolution, computing is about to get intimate.
At the time of the internet boom in the late 90s, there were around 200 million computers connected to the internet. Today, there are already around 3.5 billion people with cell phones. Half the population of the planet has one. The internet boom was big, but the cell phone computing boom could be the biggest in history.
The last internet boom was centred in the United States. That's where all the computers, the technology and the venture capital were. This time round, it may be very different though. Cell phone ownership is higher in many other countries than it is in the United States, and the networks are often stronger too. High bars here in Hong Kong, and here in India, and here in South Africa, but low bars in New York.
To succeed in the mobile revolution, you'll need a paradigm-shifting insight, but such insights are hard to come by. The first webcam on the internet filmed a coffee pot at Cambridge University in 1993. It allowed scientists to check the coffee level before they got up from their desks to get a coffee. But what was the point of it? Why look at it if you live on the other side of the world? It's always the same with new ideas. If I'd asked the consumer what they wanted, said Henry Ford in 1909, they'd have asked me for a faster horse. When you're coming up with ideas for a new mobile app, don't think desktop. Your user may be distracted, or with friends, or tired, or even drunk. That changes the way they're thinking, and that changes everything.
In 1997, the bookshop owners of the world got worried. A new arrival, Amazon, appeared on the scene. And Amazon offered 100 times more books, lower prices and free delivery. Furthermore, it could find any book their customers wanted within a minute. But how did the bookshops respond? Well, a few put in sofas. Others installed coffee shops. The rest did nothing. The bookshops carried on growing, Amazon carried on growing. But that's the way it was in the credit bubble. The credit bubble is now gone and the wolf is at the consumer's door. This time round, it's going to be very different. It's going to be dog eat dog. Telecoms companies tend all to do the same thing. One telecoms company launches a netbook, they all launch a netbook. One telecoms company launches a mobile Wi-Fi hub, they all launch a mobile Wi-Fi hub. The end result is that the brands lose differentiation, and as a result, the market becomes a commodity market. They should be more careful. A brand is different, or it is dead.
Want to know the future of society? Study the society of teens today. Teens are on Facebook because if they're not on Facebook, no one can invite them to anything. Teens share their GPS so they can meet up more easily with their friends. In fact, they share pretty much everything. In the future, there will be no privacy and no one will care. Cloud computing. It's going to be a big part of the mobile revolution. But will cell phones become just dumb terminals connected to the cloud? Contrary to what all the gurus think, we think not. Phones are status symbols, and there's not much status in a dumb phone.
"200 years ago, it wasn't internet mania or mobile mania, it was canal mania. Canals were the things that everyone were building to connect the different parts of the Industrial Revolution in Britain. And there was nowhere that was more a symbol of that Industrial Revolution and the canals than this bridge. It was built from 1795 to 1805, took 10 years. It was a massive industrial monument. But what did it do? It led to nowhere, because in the end, the rest of the canal was never built.
A lot of people lose a lot of money in tech revolutions. This time round, don't let it be you.
Search is great. Google has turned it from something that was quite complex into something that is now really simple. But there's still one thing missing from search. Search is great if you know what you want, but if there's one thing that's bugged mankind for millennia, it's that most people don't really know what they want. A cell phone is a very, very interesting device. It knows where you are, it increasingly knows what you're doing, it knows what you're thinking through what you type into it, and increasingly it also knows who you're with. It can read your habits and through that read your mentality. It should be a very, very interesting new direction for search, and it could change our lives. Augmented reality. It's cool, isn't it? You take a barcode, you put it somewhere, and something interesting appears. And the sophistication of the thing that appears keeps on going up year after year. Other people like augmented reality because it can give us cyborg vision. But perhaps we're all missing the main point here. The really interesting thing about augmented reality is the way in which it connects the computer with the real world around us. It's the first interface that does so, and therefore it's the first leap forward in user interfaces since the graphical user interface came out 30 years ago.
Many old media are dying at the moment. US newspaper circulations dropped by around 30% in 2009. TV stations across the world are in crisis, and the fixed internet is stuck on 8-year-old browsers. So in the future, the cell phone may no longer be your cool new marketing medium, it may be your only marketing medium. How do you make a packaged food brand? Most were invented in the 1950s. The recipe involved vegetable oil, flour, and television. Television was an essential ingredient to many FMCG brands of today. It made boring propositions interesting. It gave brands a personality in the way that only TV can. So many of these brands will really struggle to move over to 100% digital media. Demographic target audiences were invented in the TV age. They were a great help then. They created a currency. They helped sell and buy TV airtime. But they're not so much help today, because digital media don't target demographically. They just pick out the right people at the right time. Judge digital media using broad demographic target audience criteria, and those digital media will always fail.
There's one problem with loyalty: the cards. The average European shopper has around 27 loyalty cards. It's far too many for one person to cope with. Mobile phones could change all of that by being part of the transaction at point of sale. Mobile phones could revolutionise loyalty. Do you play Farmville on Facebook? Or Happy Aquarium, or any of those sort of games? If so, then you probably play them all day, every day. Which leads to a really interesting question. If these sort of things can get people playing all the time, could marketing campaigns get people playing all the time? To turn into not the 360-degree marketing campaign, but the 24/7 campaign. In the past, television could say things and people would listen, and then they would go into the shops and buy the thing they'd seen on television. That was great back in the TV age, but we're now in the age of the phone, where people carry phones with them as they shop, and those phones provide them with information that they didn't have before. So if you're telling people that you're the biggest or the best or the cheapest, now watch out, because their phone may be telling them a very, very different story.
500 years ago, the scientist Galileo decided to perform an experiment. "I will," he said, "drop 2 cannonballs off a tall tower. One will be large and heavy, the other will be small and light. Let's see which one lands first." "That's interesting," said the church. "The scriptures say that God will pull the heavier one faster towards the ground, so it will land first. It will be an interesting celebration of the glory of God." "On the other hand," said the church, "if this doesn't happen, you'll then be challenging the existence of God. And as a heretic, we would then be forced to persecute you for the rest of your life." Galileo did the experiment anyway. The 2 balls landed at exactly the same time, and the church persecuted him for the rest of his life. The question is, how many big company marketers would have done this experiment, given the risks involved? Would you have admitted that your big new campaign had failed? It's heresy in big companies to admit failure. We're now in a new era of mobile digital marketing. Everything is new, everything is measurable, we need to learn, and admitting failure is now a critical part of marketing.
I have bad news for everyone. We're all getting older and none of us wants to die. Cell phones are going to change health dramatically over the next 10 years as they become the central collecting point for all sorts of data about us, from our weight, from the number of steps we take per day, to measurements of our heart and other parts of our body. Expect cell phones to make a dramatic change to the way we think about health and hopefully to the length and quality of our lives. If you're an average human being living somewhere in Africa or Indonesia or China or India, then you probably earn something like $2 a day. And you don't have a big house or a car or a bank account, but nowadays you do have a cell phone. And that cell phone, thanks to schemes like M-Pesa in Kenya, can now send and receive money long distance. Cell phones are changing the financial lives of half of humanity. When television took over from print as the main medium in the 1950s, it left a lot of marketers surprised. They found that consumers didn't respond to the same careful, rational argument that they'd used in press, and instead consumers responded to things like jingles and songs and personalities. It came as a big shock to the marketing community of the 1950s. And the same shock lies in wait for digital marketers as the web shifts over from words to video this decade. When George Orwell wrote his famous book 1984 about the totalitarian state of the future, he did so using the sexy technology of his time. He wrote it in 1948, and the sexy technology then was television. So he made television the basis of his thought control. Today, though, we have the GPS-enabled cell phone, and that would make a much more interesting technology to base a book like 1984 on. It knows where you are, it knows who you're with, it knows what you're doing. We have a very, very powerful technology here, but we are playing with fire. And that's all from Mobile Mania. Thanks very much for watching.